Welcome everyone to the last LSNTAP Pro Bono Net community training of 2011. Today's topic is the expanding role of statewide websites. We have two great panelists today to talk about some of their projects and their statewide websites. Teri Ross from Illinois Legal Aid Online and Steve Hirsh from Minnesota State Bar Association. As I mentioned earlier, this is a 60-minute training, and we will be leaving about 10 to 15 minutes open at the end for folks to share their ideas about the projects Teri and Steve are talking about today, or to share out any information they have that they think might be useful to the community about how they've been using their statewide websites in new and innovative ways in the past couple of years. And of course, any questions that you have directly for the panelists, we'll also answer at the end of the training. And so with that, I'm going to switch over to Teri and give her control. So Teri, you should have control.
Okay, great. Thanks, Travis. Thanks, everyone, for joining the webinar today. As Travis said, I am the Program Director at Illinois Legal Aid Online, and I'll give you a little bit of background on that organization. It's been around for about 10 years, and we are the statewide Legal Services Technology Center. So we support our legal aid partners across the state by offering 3 websites. And you see the 3 websites there. IllinoisLegalAid.org provides easy to understand legal information to the public in over 30 areas of civil law. IllinoisProBono.org provides training and practice support for volunteer attorneys, paralegals, law students, and other legal professionals. And finally, IllinoisLegalAdvocate.org is the website that's specifically designed for those 500 or so legal aid advocates in Illinois. And for the next 15 minutes or so, I'll be talking to you about the last 2 websites, those that are designed for attorneys. Before I go into more detail, I want to be sure that you all know that we design and host our own websites, which is in contrast to what you will hear from Steve Hirsh. These 2 models have advantages and disadvantages. For us, we have complete control over the website, and we're free to add features and change things as needed. The downside of that, of course, is finding the time and the resources to do the adding and the changing. I'm going to be talking about 3 technology tools today. The first one I'll cover is legal content that we have repackaged in better user interfaces, and we'll actually have 3 examples of that one. Second, I'll discuss our mentor and case pairing matching tool that has been live on our Pro Bono website for over a year. And finally, I'll talk about the brief and pleading bank. It's one of the few password protected resources that we offer on our Illinois Advocate website. Okay, so I'm going to start with the legal content resources. Whoops. Let me just go back, forwarded. Okay, great. When Illinois Legal Aid Online first started, the role of the legal content manager, who is now incidentally its executive director, was to gather together all of the legal information that had already been produced or published by legal aid providers in the state and to post it online. As you might imagine, after a few years of this, the organization found itself with a surplus of legal articles and resources, many of which overlapped. And the primary task in legal content shifted from one of collection and publication to one of maintenance, upkeep, and distillation. And that really continues today. We have a quality assurance process that our legal content goes through based on an algorithm that looks at website visits and page views and last updated dates. When content is updated for substance, we engage an expert to volunteer their time. More often than not, these are staff attorneys, managing attorneys, litigation directors at our legal aid partners. And I'm sure I don't have to point out, but I'll say it anyways, it's infinitely easier to ask someone to review and update something that already exists than to ask them to draft something from scratch. We also engage law students to do some of the other tasks associated with the content, making sure that links to statutes and regulations work, that citations are correct, formatting for HTML. Once the substantive review is complete, we make the update to the article, and the expert who gave their time and talent to the update gets their byline on the content, and I'll show you an example of that in a moment. We then try to follow up with these volunteers after 3 to 6 months to let them know how frequently their content is being viewed, and if website users have given any specific comments about it. We have a feedback system that's tied to the individual content pages. So let's look at a couple of content types that we've recently retooled. We all know that the online landscape is ever evolving and that technology, like fashion, is forever reinvented. So we are trying to implement some more intuitive designs and better user interface to our existing content while updating the substance of the content as well. So the type of content that you see here is known as a GuideMe. Nearly all of the most popular content on our public website is already in this format. It's bundled content. It delivers information to users in a series of clickable tabs. We decided to begin using this interface on our pro bono website. The idea is that attorneys who are taking pro bono cases are often operating outside of their area of expertise, and a more digestible, distilled version of the laws and processes would both benefit them and the legal aid attorneys who are supervising or assisting them. And I'll just go ahead and click through these so you can see all the tabs. This is a very specific program that 3 legal aid providers are involved in Cook County, which is the county where Chicago resides. They have a huge mortgage foreclosure mediation program. So that gives you an example of the way the content looks. And on this one, the related articles tab, you actually see the training was webcast, and so that's posted up there as well. So if people want to go back, volunteers want to go back and review the training, they can do that. So that's the GuideMe. And now I'll show you an example of a special project homepage. This is another way we're repackaging information on our pro bono website. We're getting feedback from some of our legal aid providers that there were so many resources on the website. Right now they're numbering around 2,000, I think. There were so many resources that they had to vet the resources for their volunteers. So the homepage is really the point of first referral for volunteers in the program, and it usually includes training materials, a webcast of the training, forms or samples, and other helpful information. The URL for this particular homepage is http://overpayment.illinoisprobono.org. And all of the special project homepages, there are 4 or 5 currently in existence now, have a similar URL. This is a template. All of the content you see here actually sits on the pro bono website. If you actually click on one of these, I'll show you what the content looks like. So this is an example of the content and how it's formatted. You can see that we link out to all the relevant sections of the POMS, the CFR, and so on. And this is obviously a very specific area of law. And it has been, it was the first special project homepage that we made live, and it's been pretty successful since we've done it. So the third content type that we have recently retooled is known as the Attorney Desk Reference Manual. This is one of our oldest content types. These manuals were originally created by attorneys from 3 legal aid programs in Illinois as a fingertip resource for hotline attorneys. They were originally in big red binders. Now, however, they're only available online. These are typically very dense, comprehensive pieces of content. You can see the table of contents, and I haven't even included all of it listed here on this screenshot for Medicaid. This is a set of anchor tags, this table of content, to the article, and it used to be within the body of the article itself, which it was pretty unwieldy. I mean, this content is, there's a lot of scrolling involved anyways, but with that long table of contents, it was even worse. So we pulled it out and put it in its own section to offer a more user-friendly experience. And if you click on the appeals link here, to the TOC, you go to that section of the article as you see here. Again, we link out to the relevant sections of the statutes, the administrative rules, the policy manuals, and so on from the content. I'm going to switch gears now and talk about two other tools. The first is the mentor case matching system. This system was launched almost a year and a half ago. It was developed in partnership with the Public Interest Law Initiative, or PILI. The goal was to increase the number of pro bono volunteers and clients served through pro bono. As the name suggests, this was going to be achieved through these two systems, the first of which would link professionals who are newer to pro bono work to more experienced volunteers wishing to serve as mentors. And the second was to connect volunteers within the state to work together on specific pro bono matters. The system was conceived to make it easier for attorneys who were new to pro bono and to break down some of the geographic and expertise barriers that exist in taking pro bono cases. To the second point, in Illinois, nearly all of the attorneys in the state are centered in Chicago, in the Chicago area. And that leaves very few pro bono options for programs in the more rural parts of the state. So the idea was that through this case pairing system, an attorney in Decatur, which is a small town in the middle of Illinois, might be more willing to take a pro bono case if they could find a paralegal or a law student or another attorney in the part of the state to assist in researching or drafting or so on. I'll show you an example of what the system looks like. This is the actual entry screen. A user completes one of 4 different forms depending on what they want, and you see 2 listed here. Finding a mentor, becoming a mentor, finding assistance with a pro bono case, and becoming a case partner are the 4. We have had disappointing results from the system so far. Not entirely surprising, we've had way more requests for mentors than we've had mentors to match them with. As of November, over 100 users had requested mentors and only 21 matches had been made, and there were 10, I think, that are still waiting a response. The case pairing numbers are really dismal. Only 10 or 12 requests have been made and only 2 matches have occurred there. We're not sure at this point how to increase usage of the system, so if anyone has any suggestions for us or ideas, I would love to hear them. You can email me separately. I'll give you my email again at the end of the presentation or at the end of the session during questions. I have one other tool I'm going to talk about, and that's the brief bank. This is a brief and pleadings bank, and we offer it to our legal aid advocates. As I said earlier, it's one of the few password-protected resources that we host on the websites. So you see in this screenshot that I'm actually logged in here. For the most part, most of our legal resources are not password protected, and the exceptions are some of these things that you see here. The brief bank is one, the ICL library is another, and the hot docs is the third. And then there's some individual resources that are also restricted to registered and logged in users only. So we have this brief and pleadings bank, and this tool was widely requested by legal aid advocates, but despite the fact that it was widely requested, we built it and it has seen very little use. You see, once you click on the brief bank, you get taken to this filter that allows you to filter through, and you can see that there's 180 total. But this is over the course of 6 or 7 years. And some of these are not technically briefs or pleadings. And that's because the brief bank is the only way currently available on the website for an advocate or a registered user to post content directly to the website. So if someone wants to contribute content in a different way, they have to contact one of our legal content managers and via email and forward a document to them. But we did build the brief and pleadings bank so that advocates can upload their briefs and pleadings themselves. We've also often talked about wikitizing our legal content for attorneys, but our experience with the brief bank has been such that we're not sure if we actually did wikitize the content, if anyone would use that, if nobody's using the brief bank already. We do have a website stakeholder committee whose members were engaging in a coordinated attempt to revive this resource. So hopefully we can get some more use out of it. Again, your suggestions or thoughts on how we can make this a more viable resource for advocates is welcome. My email is tross, T-R-O-S-S, at illinoislegalaid.org. And that's it for my side, so I'm going to pass it off to Steve. Thanks.
Thank you very much, Teri. So I'm going to now turn this over to Steve.
Hi.
And
you hear me okay? Okay, so I'm going to talk briefly about a planning process that we went through here in Minnesota a year ago to try and figure out what sort of changes we should be making to the site and how people what the quality of people's experience with ProJustice Minnesota was. ProJustice Minnesota, ProJusticeMN.org, is a partnership between the State Bar Association and the Minnesota Legal Services Coalition State Support Office. So that's our state support unit that handles a lot of the technology initiatives, if not pretty much all the technology initiatives for us. And the partnership involves a sharing of expenses and also sharing of staff resources needed to keep the site going. And just before I get started, I want to comment on what Teri just talked about the difficulty of getting enough people to use some of these features so that they actually become useful, and the chicken and egg problem we have with needing to put the resources in to develop things kind of on a wing and a prayer that people will use them, because we don't really know till they're in place if they'll use them or not. And if it turns out that people won't, we may have already invested significant resources in creating something. And the very last part of my presentation will be a tool that we worked with Pro Bono Net to create to a more robust feature to link volunteers up with available cases, and I'll talk about that problem in conjunction with that. But first, let me kind of buzz through the process. So we started out, Travis, you can go ahead and flip to the next slide. Staff were sitting around talking about the site one day, and that was both Legal Services Coalition staff and the bar staff involved, realizing that the site had an old look to it, was cumbersome, and that it needed some improvements and some updating. And we collectively reached the brilliant conclusion that we ought to actually find out what people's experience with the site was to inform some of those decisions, as opposed to the four of us sitting around a room and figuring out what needed to be done. And fortunately, we had the commitment on all of our behalf to to do that. And so what we did was we designed a very time-limited and task-limited planning process, which was really essential to get people to participate, because we needed a number of people around the table from the various stakeholder groups in our justice community. And neither we, the staff, nor the volunteers we were hoping to bring in were going to be very interested in an ongoing series of meetings where we talked about issues and really never moved off that dime. So the elements that went into our planning process were identifying the people that needed to be there, all the various stakeholder groups, and I'll talk in a little more detail about that in a moment. Like I said, having a defined time commitment. We started this in the fall of 2010, and we promised people that their commitment would end by the end of the year. So I think we were looking at 4 months, and we were going to let them decide, let our advisory group, our planning group, decide the frequency of the meetings. And so it would be up to them, but we estimated 4 to 6 meetings. We needed to clearly articulate and get agreement on roles. As staff, we had ultimate responsibility for making decisions, and we expected that, given the broad nature of the stakeholder group we pulled together, that people would have different ideas about various things, and that people needed to understand that their opinion would not necessarily be what we implemented. We wanted and valued their input and would take it into account, but it was our responsibility to take all the perspectives together and develop our recommendations from that. Clear goals, meaning we needed to have actionable recommendations. So there might be a number of things that we would, as a group, think would be lovely to do, but we had to be realistic about those in terms of principally time and staff resources, and come up with things that were doable within the constraints we had. And I think all of those things, and then lunch. It really helped to feed people when we brought them in, and that really helped us create a collegial and welcoming environment, and it gave us the opportunity to at least do a little something for folks who were volunteering their time to help us with that. Okay, Travis. The stakeholder group we put together, we have, like I'm sure all of you do, various contingents within our justice community. And for us, we have staff legal services on one side, actually staffed programs, which involves, I actually think all of our staff programs have a pro bono component to them. We have no exclusively staff programs. So the mixed staff and pro bono programs, we have 2 standalone pro bono programs. We have large regional programs. We have smaller niche programs that have that focus on specific substantive areas or client populations, and those all needed to be represented. The private bar, we needed to have our representatives from our big firms, from the smaller firms, and we're really working in the last year or two to bring House Counsel more and more into our justice community. We wanted to make sure they were there. We needed our courts there. Librarians are working more and more with us. We have a very robust self-help project here. And then among those, in kind of the intersecting area, we needed to make sure we had people who had varying levels of comfortability with using technology. So we wanted to try and have people who were both very comfortable and people who really had a hard time going online for things. We wanted to make sure Minnesota is a state with one, like Illinois, with one major metro area, the Twin Cities, which is, depending on who you're talking to, 7 or 9 counties in the Minneapolis-St. Paul area. And then we've got the other 80 to 82 counties in the rest of the state, where we have a couple of small cities and some regional centers, and then a lot of very dispersed folks. And outside of the metro area, a big law firm is typically 4 lawyers, would be a big firm. So a lot of very small and solo practitioners. And we also wanted to make sure we had a good mix of generations, because we know that boomers and Gen Xers and all those other different cohorts have very different relationships to technology. It was key that we had staff to move this along and project manage this, because volunteers on their own really would have been unable to move it through, certainly in the timely way we did. And we had representatives from Pro Bono Net were on the phone for all of our meetings, and that was really helpful, in fact crucial as well, because it allowed us to get answers to certain kinds of questions right there on the spot and not have to go and get that information after a meeting and report back. And it made our discussions flow much easier and much more seamlessly. Okay, so Travis, next one. Hello? Oh, there we are. We set up a tool, and the link is right there. No, back up one. Both to model the sorts of activity we wanted to encourage people to be using, and to just create a usable vehicle for sharing information. We set up it's basically a content management site, and it's available for free from Joomla, and the site is there on the slide. And this is not password protected. The login you see on the left is for other resources we use that for site administration. But this piece of it, and it's under that Pro Justice MN button. In fact, Travis, could you just go ahead and go to that page for me, please? And this was a place where we put all of our planning materials, where we posted agendas and minutes and various resources. And so we weren't dealing with sending attachments to people and all of that sort of thing. We would just let people know, send out the link, let people know something was up there, or let them know at a meeting. So there's the page, and you can see that we have a roster, we have agenda and minutes, and then various of the data sources we used, and all of this is available to you all that want to look. We don't have time to really go through it in detail, but this is all, like I said, is in front of a password, so you're all free to go and take a look at the different items we've got up there. I'll be referring back to some of the things on this as we move through. Okay, Travis, we can go back to the slides. And the next one. Lawyers are really good, in my experience, at quote, knowing things. And knowing things without necessarily having a lot of data to point to behind that. And we did not want to make that mistake in this process. And so we did several things to collect data that would inform the discussions we would have. And the first thing we did, I think we did this before we actually started the process, is we did an analytics project with the Analysis Exchange. And this was a really lovely project. It didn't cost us anything. And this project pairs, and the sites, the first site is to the reports that we got for our project. The second site, and it looks to me like that might be misspelled in there, Analysis Exchange. I think there should probably be an E in there for Exchange. But that's the site where you can go and submit your own project proposal. And this paired us with an experienced web analysis person and a student that she was mentoring. And interestingly, Sarah, who was our lead analyst, was in Seattle. Julio, who was the student and mentee, was in Moscow. and we were here in Minneapolis, and it worked quite well. They provided us a report, gave us a lot of useful information about how the site was being accessed, highlighted a lot of questions for us, and also, and I'll touch on this in a second, did a little extra credit of a usability analysis for us, and we'll touch on that in a minute. So that was one of the data inputs for our process. Travis, we can go to the next one. We did a user survey, and what we did was we created a survey and we put a button for it on ProJustice and kept it open for a few weeks, asked people to do it. The survey results and the analysis of it are also up on the communication site that we showed earlier. This is just a screenshot of the answers to one of the questions, and that again allowed us to try and figure out both who was using the site and how they were using it, and to again develop some more information to inform our process. Next one, Travis, please. This is a slide to the usability testing. It was incredibly painful and useful to the degree that it was painful. It was hard to watch, and it gave us a lot of information that we're still digesting and trying to incorporate. We don't really have the time. I had pulled out a 2-minute section. It's about a 30-minute video, and the link to it is on the slide here, and I believe that's a link to the 2-minute section. I believe we have a link to the full 30 minutes on our communication site in the section on the analysis project. And this 2 minutes, and I actually encourage you to take the time to look at it. It is cringeworthy, but again, highly informative. And our volunteer, who was a lawyer with no familiarity with the site, and their real inability to navigate around the site to do something that we had set out as a task for them to do. It was really very instructive, and like I said, we're still trying to incorporate the things we learned from that and to do more testing. We also did something similar with our planning committee, and that's the hypotheticals, and that again is on, those are on the communication site, and we developed 2 problems, one of which was to find a substantive resource for a case. The other one had to do with connecting a volunteer to a volunteer opportunity, and those are really the 2 main functions of the site, to provide resources for people representing low-income clients, and also to facilitate the connection between programs and volunteers. And so we had them do that and then come back and debrief that. And that was another bit of usability testing and more input for our process. Okay, Travis, next one. And so we structured the discussion so that, and this slide's supposed to represent kind of a winnowing process, a funnel process, where we started off very broadly and generally and left things pretty open-ended for people to talk about. Identified themes that came, out of that, and then from those themes identified some key issues. And there's a document on the communication site where we presented a grid that to our group that had all of those, and what they were a number of decision points. And as an example, things that we came up with as really as things we would have to decide about what direction the site would go, and that had to do with things like what would be in front of a password. Is the default to make things generally available or generally not available? At the time we did this project, we had separate practice areas. We had 4 practice areas, and then the geo page, so really 5 distinct areas on the site. Whether we wanted to keep that or somehow merge those things, whether we wanted to create opportunities for people to provide feedback on resources, how we might structure the maintenance and updating of resources. And so out of that, so it was our job as staff to identify those issues, get all the input we could, and then staff proposed answers to those questions. We floated those by our planning committee, got their input on that, but again, going back to needing clear roles, it then became our job to decide how we were going to do that, and then go ahead and implement that. And at the bottom of that slide is the link to the that kind of final winnowing that we did to the decision points. Okay, Travis, next one. Excuse me. Once we had done that, we created we created another survey and gave that to our advisory group to have them prioritize the changes, and we did it within a time frame. So there were things that either given resources, given the varying ability of us to change things locally versus needing Pro Bono Net to do some things, given that some things Pro Bono Net could do as part of our annual hosting package, and that some things would require funds beyond that. Those are all things that were in the mix. And so we asked our planning group to prioritize. What do you think we should work on this year? What do you think we should work next year? What do you think we should look at in a 3-year time frame? And I think 3 years is as far out as we wanted to go, because in this world, 3 years is a couple of lifetimes, and we didn't think it would be useful to plan out any further than that. And we even knew that looking at a third year would be pretty dicey. There might be developments we didn't anticipate. And again, the link to all of those survey results is there at the bottom of the slide, and that's all available for you to take a look at. Next one, Travis, please. So this is kind of my visualization of the process we then went through once we had completed our plan. So we needed to figure out who was going to do things, figure out what cost money, figure out how much, if we needed to find money, where we were going to find it. Basic stuff, establish timelines, hold ourselves accountable. And then I'll talk about, there's 2 different paths at the bottom, and what we found happened is as we continued to meet as we were accomplishing tasks and working on tasks, and that process led to the generation of new ideas, which then went back through this loop again. The other piece that I think we have done less well than in a perfect world we would is the evaluation piece. Again, to constantly be trying to develop useful information that informs how we go forward. The reality is some things didn't require that. It's more resources to do that, and it's more time. So in a perfect world, we would do more of it. I think that we still really need to try and institutionalize that piece into our process so that we are doing it more automatically than we have been so far. Okay, Travis, next one. This was the site before our process. You can see on the left side we have various practice. We had 4 practice areas. And this picture was actually taken after we changed the site. Whoops, there we go. And you see it's the top practice area is projusticemn.org. That was actually our civil law area, which is now contains all of the resources. And then working with Pro Bono Net, let's go to the after slide, Travis. We reorganized the site. This was probably the biggest takeaway that we had, was to we kept the majority of the resources behind a password. Our folks here thought it was really important. We have a sister site for clients, Law Help MN, and people really wanted to discourage people from who weren't lawyers or working with lawyers or law students to discourage them from accessing these resources and steer them instead to law help. So we kept things, for the most part, the resources behind the password, but we consolidated everything. And so now we have what was the civil law area is now just our landing page. All of the library resources are there. This was a consolidation that Pro Bono Net was able to do for us at no additional cost. It opened up some space on the left to highlight our volunteer tool, which I'll talk about in a second. And this page is actually still under construction. We've just contracted with a developer to propose some new designs for us for this home page, but this kind of has the basic meat and potatoes. And we're not sure yet if what the causal relationship is, but we rolled this out in August, and our data for August tells us that the site had the most visitors that we've had in any single month since we got up and running 10 years ago. Like I said, I don't know if that's a happy coincidence. We'll see over the coming months. But we think this is a much easier site to use. We want to do some usability testing, in fact, with the new organization once we start working on the new design changes. And we'll see. But so far, we're really happy with what's come out of it. Okay, Travis, the last one. One of the pieces we developed, and this did require some extra funding, and I believe New York's Pro Bono Net site chipped in some, we chipped in some, and Pro Bono Net chipped in some to fund the development costs for this. And this is our volunteer tool. And what this does is it's much more robust than the one that used to exist on, and maybe still does on Pro Bono Net, the one that we had that we really didn't use. And the biggest difference is this allows volunteers to sign up for alerts by both geographic and substantive area. And then when a case is posted that meets those criteria, they get an email. Travis, click on the Find a Case for me, please. And then our programs, oh, here we go. Oh, not sure what's happening there. Our programs can post cases. So far, we have it set up where the administrators, and that's myself and John Freeman at the Coalition, approve cases. But I think we're hoping to move to a eventually to where we have approved pro bono coordinators or other people who will be posting cases as administrators, and they can just put resources up without us having to approve them. And so you can see there are cases listing here. You can see on the far right in green it says available. And what this tool allows is for a volunteer to click on a case, and if they want to, if they think they might be interested and they need to either, maybe it's a pro bono coordinator that needs to check at their firm, or they need to do their conflicts check, they can click on review this case. And what that does is change the status of the case on the prior list to pending. And so no one else can come in at that point and review the case. It kind of takes it out of the queue for a little bit. And we have preset timelines by which people have to either take the case or reject it, in which case it goes back on the list, and they get a reminder a couple of days before that's done, and if they don't respond, it automatically goes back. And so we've gotten good input from people who have looked at it about the usefulness. They like it. But we're running into some of the same problem. You can see there's only a handful of cases posted. And we also only have, I think we've got about 20 volunteers signed up. And we know that we've got multiples of volunteers, more than that, available in the state who are actively taking cases. And so there's this, critical mass problem of the site doesn't become really useful until people are using it, and people won't use it until there are cases there, and programs won't post cases until they have some hope that there'll be a volunteer to take it. And so what we've decided to do with that, and this is a work in progress, is we're working with one of our regional programs that has both a metro and a rural service delivery area, and we're going to work with them to somehow add a step into their intake system where some category of cases, and we're going to leave this up to them, that of eligible clients that don't make it, that they can't accept for a reason, then get posted on the site. And once we have a healthy looking list of cases, and I'm guessing that's going to be somewhere in the 15 to 20 range, but we haven't really picked a number yet, we will then, we being the Bar Association at that point, will go into an active recruiting effort to get volunteers to sign up. But we don't want to do that until we've really got a good selection of cases up there, because I think all of us know that if we attract someone to sign up for something like that and they get there and there's really nothing there for them, it will be very hard to get them back there again. So like Teri, if you've got ideas about how we can increase the traffic flow on both sides, both on the case and volunteer side, I'm certainly would love to hear those. I believe that my email is on the title slide to my part of the presentation. And yeah, if you've got ideas, I'd love to hear them. So that's it. Thanks.
Thank you, Steve. That was great. So thank you to both Teri and Steve. At this time, we'd like to open it up for questions. Feel free to post questions into the Q&A box or raise your hand and I can unmute you. I just want to go back to flag a couple comments and questions that came up for Teri's portion. So John Mayer had a couple really useful suggestions and also had a question. So I'm going to work backwards with his suggestions. The first was regarding the brief bank, and he mentioned that it does not have to be used a lot to be useful. A little usage goes a long way, and to measure that by value, not by volume. He also had a suggestion that you interview folks who have used the brief bank to get their story, which was very useful. And he had a question, and John, if I can unmute you, if you'd like to expand on this a little more, but the question was, what are you doing now to attract attorneys to the Pro Bono Mentor Program in Illinois?
Okay, John, thanks for your comments. Those are both great suggestions. And as far as attracting mentors, we have Pili has talked to representatives at the larger legal aid programs to see if they have volunteers who are still interested in staying in pro bono work but don't have as much time, and would they be willing to be mentors. They have not had great success with that so far. I'd have to follow up with our partner over at Pili to give you any actual numbers. The other development regarding the mentor matching piece is that we're considering revising the tool, expanding the tool really, so that it can be applicable to law school programs within the state, so that because an awful lot of law schools have some sort of alumni, law student alum and law student, current law student matching program. And if there's a way that we can revise the form slightly so that we can match up alumni with existing law students and use the tool in that way. So those are sort of the two developments. As far as the case pairing goes, we haven't really, come up with any bright ideas aside from the marketing that we've already done, which we contacted all of the bar associations in the state and told them about it, and have been working through the
Illinois State Bar Association Delivery Legal Services Committee on that tool.
Great, thanks. As mentioned, we have a couple minutes left, so if anybody has any more questions or would like to share some of the projects they've been working on, feel free to raise your hand and I can unmute you, or type it into the QA box. I do want to note, John did confirm the career service and alumni office at law schools could be good places to get the word out for potential volunteers. So that's great. Okay, great. Well, if there's nothing else, I just want to thank Teri and Steve for their great presentations today, and thank you all for joining and participating. As mentioned, all these materials and recordings will be posted online, and you'll should get a notification via email about this, and it will also go out on the LSNTAP Pro Bono Net's website and via the listservs as well. So thank you all, and have a good rest of the year.